Hey everybody, as you can imagine, it is a relatively busy day in the shanty. And it's a busy day in the shanty because, borrowing from an email that our partner Rob Dubois sent out this morning, today is the day. And what do I mean by today is the day? Today is the day that OSHA published its long-awaited emergency temporary standard on vaccine requirements for employers with 100 or more employees. And I know you are all super excited to hear all about it. You're not going to hear all about it here today, and here's why. You guys have already seen our e-alert that went out earlier today, letting you know that this thing was published. There's going to be another e-alert that's going to go out today, hopefully today, with some more detail in it. This Shanty podcast is not going to cover a ton of detail about the standard. The reason for that is because it's 490 pages long, and honestly, I haven't had a chance to read it yet. We're going to get into that, and we are going to get you, we've got brilliant people working on reading this thing and summarizing it to get you an e-alert, hopefully today. As I said, we are going to do a webinar on this, hopefully next week. Keep an eye on your mail, and you'll get more information on that, and we'll cover lots of detail in that webinar. The reason I'm bothering you today and getting this out, and I'm sorry if I'm cluttering up your inbox, is there were a couple things that I wanted you to know about, because we've gotten a lot of questions leading up to this day about a couple of issues with the ETS that I want to cover very, very briefly. Now, I told you I didn't read the thing already, so how do I know what to cover? I know what to cover because OSHA was kind enough, and I mean that sincerely, to publish a set of frequently asked questions along with the ETS. They also published a summary and some other stuff. I'm going to use those to talk to you today about some basics, and I mean high-level basics about the ETS that you might want to know about. And I'm going to focus on the 100 employee issue because a lot of you have had questions about how do we count these employees. I'm also going to do something today I try not to do in these things, and that's read. I'm going to read some of these questions to you, and I'm going to read some of the answers. And I'm doing that because, frankly, I haven't had a chance to digest it yet to put my own spin on it. I'll give you my own spin where I can, but I'm going to be doing some reading. So let's start out with a little summary, all right? First of all, who's covered? Well, we know employers with 100 or more employees are covered, and that runs the gamut from every industry, including some people who aren't used to necessarily dealing with OSHA on a regular basis. If you're in heavy manufacturing and you have a lot of manufacturing plants, you probably had more dealings with OSHA and my OSHA in your past. But if you're a bank, you may never have had OSHA in your workplace or had to deal with OSHA, or maybe you've never thought about OSHA. Well, you're going to start thinking about it now, because this thing covers everybody with 100 or more workers in any industry that's covered by OSHA. Who doesn't it cover? All right. Who doesn't it cover? Well, it doesn't cover people with less than 100 employees. And we're going to get into that in some detail, what 100 employees means, because I want you all to know that. So you can start thinking about what you're going to do. And it doesn't cover people that are covered by the Safer Federal Workforce Task Force guidance. That's federal contractors and subcontractors. And it doesn't cover people that are covered by the healthcare ETS. You're covered by those standards. And hopefully you're already in compliance with those, and you're working on them. Which of your employees are subject to the requirements? Okay. All of your employees who go to a workplace are subject to the either vaccination requirement or the testing requirement. There are some employees who aren't. All right. The ETS does not apply to employees who do not report to a workplace where other individuals, such as coworkers or customers, are present. Listen to that. It doesn't apply to a workplace where other individuals, such as coworkers or customers, are present. Somebody who doesn't go to the office and works from home never goes to the office. They don't have to get either the vaccine or be subject to the testing requirement. As long as they're working from home. The minute they go in the office, they're covered. All right? The minute they go to a customer location, they're covered. It also doesn't apply to employees who work exclusively outdoors. We're going to get into those issues in one of the other publications. When is it effective? It's going to be published in the Federal Register tomorrow. Technically, it becomes effective on that day. But you've got 30 days after publications to comply with all of the requirements of the order except the vaccination and testing requirements. The vaccination and testing requirements go into effect 60 days after it's published. So basically, we're looking at January 4. Now, a bunch of you have questions about and have asked questions about, wait a minute, Michigan is a state plan state. Does that mean I have to comply with this thing right away? Here's the deal. Michigan, because they're a state plan state, the Michigan OSHA has 15 days to tell the feds what they're going to do. They have two options. They can either adopt this standard wholesale, or they can write their own that's at least as effective as this. They've got 30 days to do that once this gets published. So 15 days to tell OSHA what they're going to do, and then another 15 days to get their own standard published. You're not going to get extra time after that 30 days. In other words, just because we're covered by a state plan, we get the 30 days. But OSHA built that 30-day window into their standard. So you here in Michigan are going to have to start doing everything but the testing within 30 days from today. And you're going to have to start doing the testing 60 days from today, just like everybody else, because OSHA built kind of that window in there to get everybody a chance to get up and get in compliance. So the advantage we have by being a state plan state kind of went away based on the way OSHA published this, or the way OSHA wrote this thing. Now, they wrote this thing with two things in mind. Number one, they know it's going to get challenged legally, and that's part of the reason why it's 490 pages long. A lot of justification in there. And they wrote it to be a permanent rule. So not only is this ETS going into effect tomorrow when it's published with the dates that I already talked about, but they're going to put a notice and comment period in, 30 days to comment. And then the anticipation is that after this thing expires in 6 months, it will become a permanent rule, unless it's overturned by a court or something else happens in the meantime. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of the thing. Okay, the thing establishes minimum vaccination verification, face covering, and testing requirements to address what OSHA calls grave danger that COVID creates in the workplace. Okay? So that's why they're doing this. All right. Okay. So let's cover one issue that I want to cover that all of you have had questions on. And that's the issue of, okay, we now know who it covers and who it doesn't cover. How do I count this 100 employee thing, right? Do I have 100 employees that's going to make me covered by this? And remember, that was the 500 employees was a big issue with the FFCRA, and this is a big issue here, and OSHA knew that was going to be an issue. So they gave very extensive FAQs on this. And I'm going to do something I try not to do, which is I'm going to read. So if I look away from the screen, I'm sorry. I'm not doing that because I'm trying to be, ironic or make this thing look fancy. I'm doing it because I'm reading off of my screen. And I want to go through these EAQs on how we get to 100 employees, because I think this is really important, and it will then give you an indication of what you need to do going forward and what you need to pay attention to and what you don't. Okay, so how do we count to determine if the employer meets the 100 employee threshold? And there's a bunch of FAQs on this, and I'm going to go through some of them. The first question is, are employees who perform work at offsite locations such as customer homes counted toward the 100 employees? And the answer to that is yes. In determining the number of employees, employers must include all employees across all of their U.S. workplaces, regardless of the employee's vaccination status or where they perform their work. For example, if an employer has 150 employees and 100 of them perform maintenance work in customers' homes, I had a refrigerator delivered today. Are those two guys going to be counted that delivered the refrigerator? For purposes of the 100 employees, the answer is yes. If an employer has 150 employees and 100 of them perform maintenance work at customers' homes, primarily working from their company vehicles, and rarely or never report to the main office, that employer would still fall within the scope of the standard because he has 150 employees or she has 150 employees. All right, next question. Is the count based on 100 employees for the entire business, or is it a location-driven count? Do we look at establishments like we do for some other federal standards? According to OSHA, the count should be done by the employer at the employer level. They say firm or corporate-wide level, not the individual location level. Therefore, for a single corporate entity with multiple locations, all employees at all locations are counted. For example, if a single corporation has 50 small locations with at least 100 employees total in combination, the employer is covered even if some of the locations have no more than 1 or 2 employees. The example I'll give you is Warner Norcross and Judd. And we have partners and employees. But let's just think of our employees for a minute. We've got to have 200 of them, at least. But we're spread around 8 locations. We don't have 100 employees in more than 2 of those locations. Probably Grand Rapids, our Grand Rapids office, and our Detroit office. But we have more than 100 employees total. I'm one of them, our staff. Maybe not our partners, I don't know, but our staff. I'm an employee. And people like me are employees and associates are employees. Because we have more than 100 of them, we are a covered entity, even though we have some locations, say our Macomb office or our Lansing office, which is pretty small, or Muskegon or Holland and so on. That makes us a covered employer, so we're covered. All right? How are part-time employees counted? Are they counted in the 100 employee threshold? And the answer to this is easy. OSHA says yes. Part-time employees count toward the total number of employees. For example, a company with 75 part-time employees and 25 full-time employees has 100 employees and would be within the scope of the standard. But independent contractors do not count toward the total number of employees. Now, before you get all worked up and say, well, just make everybody an independent contractor, don't forget you can't do that. And they've got to be real independent contractors, not people you call independent contractors that aren't really independent contractors. What about employees working from home? Do employees who are working from home count toward the 100 employee minimum? Yes. OSHA says yes. If an employer has 150 employees, 100 of whom work from their homes full-time and 50 of whom work in the office at least part of the time, the employer would be within the scope of the ETS because it has more than 100 employees. However, the standards requirements, that is the testing and the vaccination requirement, would only apply to the 50 employees who work in the office at least part-time around other individuals, and not those 100 employees working exclusively from their homes. Before you get too excited about sending everybody home, so you don't have to do this, they've got to work exclusively from their home. If they come into the office at all, then they're subject to either the vaccination or the testing requirements. How they're subject, we'll talk about in another location, but they are. What about staffing agency employees? I've got a bunch of temps, and they come to me from ABC Staffing Agency. Do the staffing agency employees count? They don't. Not for you. They do for the staffing agency, but they don't for you. In scenarios in which employees of a staffing agency are placed at a host employer location, only the staffing agency would count these jointly employed workers for purposes of the 100 employee threshold for coverage under the ETS. The host employer, however, would still be covered if it has 100 of its own employees in addition to the staffing agency employees. On the other hand, if a host employer has 80 permanent employees and 30 temporary employees supplied by a staffing agency, the host employer would not count the staffing agency employees for coverage purposes and therefore would not be covered. Okay? What about temporary or seasonal employees? Employees that you hire yourself on a temporary basis or on a seasonal basis. Temporary and seasonal workers employed directly by the employer, not obtained through a staffing agency, are counted in determining if the employer meets the 100 employee threshold, provided that they are employed at any point while the ETS is in effect. So if you had 120 employees in August because it was your high season, and 50 of them were seasonal employees, and they're all gone now. And now you're down to, what would that be? 80 employees. No, 70 employees. Math, right? My strong suit. Now you're down to 70 employees, and the ETS goes into effect tomorrow. You're not covered. But if at any point while the ETS is in effect, you jump back over that 100 employee threshold because of these seasonal employees, then you are covered. Okay? Do we consider vaccination status when we're counting employees? The answer is no. You count your employees. It doesn't matter whether they're vaccinated or not. You count them. All right? What about employees who work exclusively outdoors? Do we have to count them? Yes, we have to count them. Now, I already told you that they don't have to be vaccinated or tested, but you still have to count them for purposes of the 100 employee test. What if my number of employees fluctuates? Okay? What if it goes up and down and up and down? How do I determine if I have 100 employees? In the determination of whether an employee falls within the scope of this ETS based on the number of employees, it should initially be made as of the effective date of the standard, which is tomorrow. You're going to count your employees tomorrow and determine whether or not you've got 100 employees. If the employer has 100 or more employees on the effective date, the ETS applies for the duration of the standard. If the employer has fewer than 100 employees on the effective date of the standard would not apply as of the effective date. However, if you subsequently hire more workers and hit the 100 employee threshold, you would be expected to come into compliance with the standard's requirements. Once the employer has come within the scope of the ETS, the standard continues to apply for the remainder of the time the standard is in effect, regardless of fluctuation. All right. So before you go out and fire 50 of your people before tomorrow and then hire them all back the day after, you're still going to be covered. All right. You're still going to be covered. And one final thing. How will the ETS apply to unionized workforces? Here's what OSHA says. Employers in unionized workforces with 100 or more employees must, like all covered employers, follow the minimum requirements established by the ETS. Nothing in the ETS prevents you from doing more or agreeing with your union that you're going to do more. But just because you have a union doesn't mean you're off the hook. You have to comply with the standard. All right. That's all we're going to do in this one. There's lots and lots of more information that we're going to get to you. Like I said, we are doing an e-alert that will hopefully come out today along with this. We are doing a webinar that will hopefully be next week. Keep your eye on your mail if you have any questions at all about whether this thing covers you or what the 100 employer threshold is. Give us a call. Do me one favor, will you? Give us a minute. It's long, and we're working our way through it as fast as we can. And we're going to try to have all the answers for you that we can as quickly as we can. So we appreciate you all very much. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.